Just before 6 in the evening, 222 Squadron spotted 12 Messerschmitt 109s. Lardner Burke and another 222 pilot opened fire, and black smoke was seen bellowing from the plane. Lardner Burke broke to the left, allowing the other pilot to fire for 14 seconds. The Messerschmitt ploughed into the ground at 500 miles an hour. From up here, Britain looks so peaceful. It's hard to believe that 70 years ago, we would have been flying through a battlefield. But there's still plenty of evidence of Britain's flying past, if you know where to look.
We can see Biggin Hill down there, can't we?
Yeah, indeed, John. The main runway you can see running across from left to right.
And that was such an important airfield during the Battle of Britain, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Biggin Hill's closeness to London made it a prime target for the Luftwaffe. RAF squadrons based here claim to have destroyed more than 1,000 enemy aircraft, losing several hundred pilots in the process. Ground crew suffered too, with many people being killed in a dozen separate attacks spread over 6 months.
I suppose what's striking, always when you're up in the air watching the Spitfire pilots, you think how lonely they must have been, and how difficult it must have been controlling these small planes. All right, fighting for your country, but at extraordinary personal risk when you would know that many of your friends would have been killed on these missions. So coming home, as we are now, flying down, this must have been a terrific sense of relief that we are back on the ground, back on terra firma.
But sometimes it's easy to forget that for every Spitfire pilot in the air, there was always someone on the ground, anxiously waiting to see if they would come home. Flight Lieutenant Pat Lardner Burke's son, Martin, has found some letters from his mother that reveal the extraordinary demands made, not just on the pilots, but also on their families.
And we've actually only just unearthed these very recently, a couple of days ago. Credit to my mother here. I mean, she's a wonderful, wonderful hoarder. On Sunday afternoon, I went down to Hornchurch, Sundays being the day in which females are allowed onto the premises. Pat is expected to have the afternoon off, but when I arrived, he was away on an unexpected sweep, so the adjutant met me with the squadron car. Pat arrived back at about 4, and we then had tea and sat on the lawn. At 6 o'clock, they went off on another sweep. I managed to get down to the aerodrome and then watched all 26 Spitfires take off. It was a marvellous sight. And 26 Spitfires took off, and, you know, she just sat on the lawn. Oh,
yeah.
These guys would, you know, the wives and the girlfriends would just sit there and hope that 26 got counted back again. They were away for 1.5 hours, and then we watched them all come back again.
But they had to just wait.
Well, you imagine having a tea party and suddenly all the partners take off, and, you know, you just don't know if they're coming back, do you?
No. Do you feel you know him? Do you feel closer to him now, perhaps, than you have been?
I actually do, yes, yes.
Yeah. And your feelings about him?
Well, still my father. We knew him when we were young. I mean, it's a bit tricky. That's not one I can really answer, because my feelings are for my father.
But pride?
Oh, there is pride, yes.
A lot of pride?
Yes.
Flight Lieutenant Pat Lardner Burke recorded his last flight with MH434 in October of 1943. They'd been together on nearly 60 sorties and claimed 2.5 kills, 2 Focke-Wulf 190s and the Messerschmitt 109 he'd shot down with his 222 colleague. D-Day now loomed large on the horizon. It was the ultimate call to arms, a vital part of the Spitfire story. Unfortunately, we lose track of our plane 3 months before the Normandy landings. These photos of MH434 were taken then at Hornchurch. Flight Lieutenant Lardner Burke was put in charge of one squadron, and he played an active role on D-Day. Sadly, the D-Day generation are disappearing, but there are still a few special people who remember one of the most extraordinary days in our history.
When we flew on the morning of June the 6th, the Solent was empty, all the mechanised vehicles had gone, and one thought about those boys on the beaches, although we didn't know how bad it was going to be.
We took off at 4-something, and we were over the beaches at 5:20 for the dawn. And we looked down and saw this colossal armada. I mean, everybody's described it better than I can.
I do believe that in World War II, a Spitfire pilot's role was an extremely important one, and obviously the landings in D-Day and the need for protection to our thousands of ships and the men who went across was a vital protective element.
The sea was just littered with ships. The Navy were there with several of the captured French battleships as well, and they were all firing up into the air, mainly at us. I think they'd been warned there was going to be a huge invasion of probably of 109s, which look a little bit like a Spitfire, and everybody was a bit trigger happy, I suppose. We didn't grumble about it. It was a natural thing, I suppose, to happen. At least they were firing at somebody.
The Spitfire story has so many elements: sacrifice, bravery, even glamour. The British people loved the Spitfire. It's a romance of a kind, but I don't think any Spitfire love story can beat this one. Engineer Joe and truck driver Betty, or Butch to her friends, met working on Spitfires during the war.
If there's 3 things concerned in this story, it's Betty, Joe and the Spitfire.
Their love story began in a hangar at Biggin Hill in 1943.
Joe was standing on the wing of the plane.
Of a plane like this?
Yes. And of course they were all cheeky.
Were they?
Oh, yes.
I looked at her and I thought, I wonder.
You wonder what?
She's the best. She's the best looking lot in that bunch. I wonder if I got a chance with her.
Right.
And I obviously had, because I think she said something like it, but a lot ruder.
Did you really? Can you remember that, Betty?
I think it was a bit saucy.
Go on, tell us. You can tell us now. We're ready for it.
And if you don't, I will.
You say, Tom.
She says I'm having some of that.
Did you really? Goodness me. I mean, this is shocking,
she's only 22, you know. We were both 22 then.
So before you knew where you were going to dances together?
Yes. Well, we were both mad on dancing.
Right.
Absolutely mad on dancing.
Like you.
Joe and Betty's friendship blossomed in the dance halls in and around London. A night of dancing the foxtrot, the waltz and the rumba provided them and other servicemen and women with a brief respite from the realities of the war. But as Joe and Betty grew closer, there was one reality they could not escape from.
We had feelings for each other, but Betty informed me. She says, look, I am engaged.